Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Wayne, and I'm here with Anodea Judith, and we're about to embark on our webinar, Visioneering the Future. I think you'll enjoy the webinar immensely. We'll be recording the webinar, and so we'll send out a recording hopefully within a few days. And just a matter of logistics, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, a chat button at the bottom of your screen, so you can ask questions through the Q&A or chat, and also raise your hand if you want to talk, and we'll call on you. Everybody's muted, but we can call on you, do that. So,
and I also, hi, this is Anodea. Welcome, everyone. I'd love to see who's on the call. So if you just want to type your name and the city or country you're from in the chat box, we can all see who's here. It's always nice just to see names and places, and we know how worldwide spread we are, and we can see the community brings us sort of all in the room together. And I'm Anodea, and I am from the San Francisco Bay Area.
And I'm Michael, and I'm from Saratoga Springs, New York. And we're hearing from Robin, let's see, Louise. So good to see you both. And Robert from Hawaii, Pahoa, hopefully I got that right, Robin from Connecticut, Denise from Champaign, Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. My son went to the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. Alda from Costa Rica, Linda Peoria. Luis is from Monterey, Mass, and New York City. Trudy from Fountain Hills, Arizona. Cindy from Fountain Hills,
Arizona. I remember you, yes.
Jane from Asheville. Nina from Syracuse, and Darius, my friend Darius from San Francisco Bay Area, and Brian from Massachusetts, who knows you from Kripalu, Anodea, and Dr. Topia from Tucson, and Wendy from Queensbury, Sandra and Mario from Saratoga Springs, not far from me, and Anne-Marie Brick from Fountain Hills, Arizona. So great. And we'll probably have other people joining us as happens. And all I can say is, wow, Anodea, we plotted out this webinar a month ago, and so much has happened. And I think now more than ever, the time is right for the ideas and the things we'll be talking about. So,
I think so too. Yeah, there's, a system needs to be disrupted in order to evolve. And a system as big as our political system and economic system and all the systems we have in place, this virus is a major disruptor, and it is allowing things to open up in ways that I think are really quite amazing. So I hope to get into that in the call.
Yeah, there's so much we could talk about. Anodea, you were going to lead us. Do you want to introduce yourself in any way?
Sure. For people who don't know me, I'm Anodea Judith, and I met Michael when he was doing interviews, and I was teaching at Kripalu, which is near Saratoga Springs, and he interviewed me, and then it ended up being in his film On the Path to Strawberry Fields, and we got reconnected around that, and we are aligned in our sense of visioneering the future, and decided to do some webinars together and see if we can get a group of people that want to co-think all this with us. So I'm very happy to be here. I guess my claim to fame is mostly the chakras, and I see them as an evolutionary system for not only personal evolution, but global evolution. I wrote a book about that called The Global Heart Awakens, Humanity's Rite of Passage from the Love of Power to the Power of Love. And I've written a score of other books too, but that's not as relevant to our talk today. So I'm happy to be here.
Great, and I'll just say just a few words about myself. Anodea mentioned I made a documentary feature film called On the Path to Strawberry Fields. Before that, I was doing an interview series, Interviews with the Leading Edge. And besides all that work, I work in the healthcare field as a practitioner of Chinese medicine, integrative medicine. And another time I am going to do a webinar focused on health and viruses and how we can stay healthy. But so when I approached Anodea about doing this webinar, it was kind of a a progression from my film and the ideas in the film. So hopefully you've seen my film. Perhaps I'll put in the chat box the link so you can see it if you haven't. So that's it.
Okay. Well, we'd like to start with a guided meditation as we invite you to Visioneer, which is to be a pioneer in visioning, to look forward into the future and imagine the kind of world we might create. So close your eyes and go inside and allow yourself to align your body, pulling your crown up, the top of your head up, and sending your roots down out of the base of your spine. And as you pull the two ends of the spine in opposite direction, everything within the core begins to line up. And we can take a moment to inhale and imagine a little ball of light coming right up the core, like an elevator going up the shaft, all the way to the crown on the inhale. And exhale, seeing that ball of light go all the way down to the root, right where you're sitting, the base of the spine. And a couple more times, inhaling that little ball of light right up the core. And exhaling, letting it go all the way back down. And when we do this, we are accentuating the core of the body, where all the chakras are, and we are aligning ourselves between heaven and earth. I believe that we are here for the purpose of learning how to create heaven on earth. So let's take a moment to imagine that. What would heaven on earth look like from your perspective? Well, I like to use the chakra model to imagine a society that is governed by wise elders, wise leaders. Maybe they aren't elders, maybe they're even younger people, but they have wisdom. They tap into wisdom traditions. They read, they study, they listen to other wise people and counsel. They think and deliberate, and they rule with wisdom. A society that values wisdom, that values the spiritual traditions that help us evolve our own consciousness. Imagine meditation, yoga, things that are healthy for us and evolve us spiritually being part of our everyday curriculum in the schools, in life. And then we come to sixth chakra, where we imagine a world of beauty. Nature creates such beauty in everything she does, the mountains and the forests and the seas and the cliffs and the rocks. Can we create a world as beautiful? Beautiful in our surroundings, beautiful in how we dress, beautiful in where we live. Can we create beauty all around us? Can we create a world that has artistry, creativity, where people feel self-expressed, where truth is highly valued and lies are not tolerated, where people are guided by the greater field of the truth? And of course, we want a world guided by the heart, a world of love, meaning that people care what happens to our world. They care what happens to other people, to animals. We care about the environment. We care about what we do. We care about what we put in our bodies in terms of food and chemicals. We care about what we put into our atmosphere. We hold people in compassion who are less fortunate. We practice generosity. A world that is governed by love. A world that is peaceful and solving its problems with diplomacy rather than war. Can we imagine that? In a world where the people feel empowered. We don't feel like, oh, there's nothing we can do, that we're helpless, that big people on top are the only ones with power. But a world where there are systems in place that allow people to participate in democracy, to participate in creating our world, to participate in making changes, in creating, to work together and find our empowerment by working with others. Based on the second chakra, a world where we feel good, where life is pleasurable, where we feel good in our bodies, where we wake up in the morning and we look out on the pleasant surroundings, where the food we eat is clean and plentiful, where it's a pleasure to do the work that you do. And finally, a world that has a healthy environment, a world where our bodies can be healthy, a world of abundance, where things are managed wisely so there's enough for everyone. The chakras create a template for creating an enlightened civilization. And of course, there are many more aspects of this. But this can be a place where we start our dreaming and see it together now. Thank you.
Wow, that was powerful and so apropos.
It kind of hits the basic points of how humans and their chakras interact with a larger collective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so why don't you share with people you were the initiator of this webinar, and I thought it was a great idea, but share with people about what Visioneering is and how it makes a difference.
Yeah, so visioneering is the art of visioning and then bringing it to fruition, whether your personal life or the life of society. And it's really more relevant now than ever before. I came across a quote just yesterday by Milton Friedman, famous economist. I don't agree with his economic theories, but he said this: only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. When that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on the ideas that are lying around. That, I believe, is our basic function: to develop alternatives to existing policies, to keep them alive and available until the politically impossible becomes the politically inevitable. And that's the thing. In times of crisis, such as what we're living through right now, and it will pass, seemingly impossible ideas suddenly become possible. In times of volatility, there's great opportunity to have great evolutionary leaps. And Anodea, in my film, both you and John Perkins, who I also interviewed and is in the film, made the point that things can change rather rapidly. Mindsets can change. You know, we've seen that kind of reverse. Things have, I don't know, devolved, degenerated, whatever you want to call it. There's been tremendous shock, tremendous change. So at the same time, things can change, and the changes we're looking to possibly bring forth, and that we're going to discuss a little later, are possible now more than ever. So I want to show just a minute-long clip from my film with John Perkins talking about the ability to change the mindset. So I'm going to share the screen. Let's see. Oops, sorry. It's right here. And get it set full time, full scale. Hopefully the sound will come through good.
Can you go full screen on it?
Okay, here we go. Full, yeah. There we go.
We've created a failed system globally. A system where less than 5% of us live in the United States and consume almost 30% of the world's resources. That's not a model. China can't do it. Nobody can replicate that. The numbers don't add up. And we're getting it. And so we're seeing that what we've got to do is create a whole new system. And it can happen very quickly. All we have to do is change that mindset. The same way that my mindset was changed in the Amazon when I was almost dying. All it took was a mindset. One night, one mindset, everything changed. That's what we need here, and I think we're getting there pretty quickly, frankly.
If we look at evolution, the speed of transfer of information is changing logarithmically. It used to take, in the Roman Empire, when we had such strict, orders that came from somebody and they had to write a letter, and that letter had to be carried on horseback, it took maybe 3 months to get somewhere, to let someone know that, their son had died in the battle, or that there was an order to be carried out. Now information is instantaneous, and the faster information travels, the faster we can change. I would say virtually everyone in the world knows about this coronavirus right now. This is something we are all facing together. And this is creating more rapid change than I would have thought possible. This tiny little virus that you can't even see with the naked eye is creating change on a global scale at lightning speed. And we'll talk about some of that as we go in this webinar.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing about viruses. People are nervous, panicking about this little piece of DNA, strand of DNA encased with protein. There's 6,500 identified viruses, but scientists estimate there's probably 10 trillion viruses, 250 of which of the 6,500 identified find homes in humans. Anyways, they're not malicious. They're full of information, full of complexity, and they're symbiotic with human beings. So really, we could say the virus is trying to teach us a lesson. Someone said to me today, oh, I didn't bring it with me, it's a piece of paper, but they said, we've had many warnings, many alerts, and now the virus is having to hit us in the head. Really what it's telling us, our lives are out of balance. What we've done to the planet is out of balance, and it's time to wake up. So this is our wake-up call. The virus will pass, but this is our opportunity. And you talk about, Anodea, about moving to a new story and a new operating principle, a new paradigm, a power of love. So maybe you could say some about that.
Yeah, as I have studied, evolution and history and systems theory over, decades, and looking at how systems evolve, I realized that, when we talk about a new paradigm, which so many millions of people are talking about, we know that it's ripe, we know elements of it, we know that it's higher consciousness, we know that it's ecological, we know that it's health-based, we know that it's got to be kind, we know so many things about it, but we can't do it from the same organizing principle. That's the trouble. We need to go to a new kind of organizing principle. And at all the major eras of our past sociocultural history, there has been something that happened that allowed humanity to organize in a different way. We used to be organized by, our tribes that went from cave to cave across the land. And then we could plant, and we were organized by farming and the cycles of, winter and summer, and our myths were all about that. And then we came into the first civilizations, the first cities, where we had so many people living together in a small area that couldn't read or write, didn't know about science, didn't have any technology, often spoke different languages and had different customs. we had to be ruled by a very strong leader that was almost dictatorial and saying, this is how it'll happen. These are my orders that will be carried out down the line and everyone will obey. And I liken this to parents of very young children. They need to, with a 3-year-old, you need to set the rules. No, you don't play outside on the street, and you go to bed here, and you don't eat all the ice cream. And, that's because the 3-year-old can't do that for themselves. But humanity has been growing up. We have learned to read and write, and now we have the internet. Now we have automobiles and airplanes, and we have science, and we understand more. And we are not little children anymore. And so we're starting to reorganize at a new level. And instead of the old level being a top-down power over where one person gets elected, so-called, and has all the power to put everybody they want in their cabinet and tell everybody else what to do and make the laws that affect the whole world, that's an outdated system. And we're getting demonstrations that how dangerous it is and how much it doesn't work, especially in a case like the coronavirus or in terms of climate change. So we're in the cusp of going to a new era, which I call moving from the love of power to the power of love as an organizing principle. And so what does the power of love look like? It's more egalitarian. It's more platform to platform, peer to peer. It's more self-organizing systems rather than top-down systems. It's more rising from the grassroots up as people organize and collaborate and work together. And so no one leader is going to come up with this new paradigm. It's not going to happen that way. It's not going to come through that. It's going to come from new organizing principles among the people. And that's some of why we're doing these webinars, to get people together talking about these ideas, because this is a co-creation that all of us that feel called can be part of. So I think there's a lot more to say, but I think I'll park it there.
And we're truly working to a new paradigm, one of what's been called a collaborative commons. I call it an evolved open culture. And as we see, in a way, as I said earlier, how things can change quickly, and we're seeing now with the virus and how we're in home, we're connecting in different ways, but we can see how the social fabric, how tender it is, how tenuous. And so we're watching it unravel, but that's not a bad thing, because then it'll be reknitted, and we have the opportunity to refabric that into something much more beautiful. And any society that really has coherence has social solidarity, and at the heart of social solidarity is something that's called soulcraft, where we really care about each other, and everything we do is for the common good. And we think, is this what is correct for everyone? And so this kind of society and paradigm based on, as you say, Anodea, the power of love, and I call it collaborative commons or evolved open culture, really is that way. So perhaps we could drill down a little more and talk about the sectors of society, sectors of transformation. And Anodea, we're kind of going to give an overview of these different areas, and we've talked about that if we do subsequent webinars, drilling down further into these topics. So,
yeah, well, one of them, as we're seeing in the news every single day, is the topic of politics and governance. And that is really about, how do we choose our leaders? Like, what kind of democratic process, and how does democracy work, and how can democracy work better? And then how do we choose wise leaders? And how do people govern? How do the wise leaders interface with, for the people, of the people, with the people? How do they interface and create a governing system that we are all part of? So that's one big, huge area of a system that needs to change. And it's so outdated. This system was set up when there were 13 colonies and people rode on horseback. And, most people lived wherever they lived for all of their lives and didn't go much of anywhere else. And now we have the same system of two people from every state, and it's not representative of the people. What are some things we can do there? What if we had, a minister of forestry, a minister of finance, a minister of healthcare, that we elected those people. So we elected the people who were most qualified for those important jobs. And they told the senators what to do, of how to tell the people in their own states to follow the principles. I mean, that might be another way of looking at it, but this is kind of dreaming.
Hey, and that's what we need to do. We need to dream, envision, and imagine. And talking about that paradigm that we're coming from, that top-down paradigm, we truly live in an oligarchy in the United States, and also a duopoly of a two-party system. The United States is one of the few countries left in the world that has only a two-party system. Say what you want, and the difference between Republicans and Democrats, that's it. And especially Democrats in the primary season, we had people with different perspectives and different wings of the party. And if we lived where most countries have a multi-party system, if we had a multi-party system in this country, then the umbrella is wide enough for all these points of views, and you have much more pluralistic thinking, and you have coalition governments, you have all kinds of ideas that get put out there, and there'll be small parties, bigger parties, but many members of a parliament or a Congress representing many parties. We have, besides that, we have the problems with electoral college. We have the problems with a Senate where every state has two senators, and so you have Wyoming with only a small population having as equal representation as California with 40 million people. So there's, as you said, Anodea, a lot of outdated approaches that just aren't relevant for the times. And these are things that we need to visioneer. What kind of political governance system do we want to live in?
I have a couple quotes in front of me by John Adams and George Washington, both of them warning us against the two-party system. John Adams said, "There is nothing which I dread so much as a division of the Republic into two great parties, each arranged under its leader and concerting measures in opposition to each other. This, in my humble apprehension, is to be dreaded as the greatest political evil under our Constitution." This was John Adams. And George Washington, in his farewell presidential speech, said, "The alternate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension, which in different ages and countries has perpetrated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism. But this leads at length to a more formal and permanent despotism. The disorders and miseries which result gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose in the absolute power of an individual. And sooner or later, the chief of some prevailing faction, more able or more fortunate than his competitors, turns this disposition to the purposes of his own elevation on the ruins of public liberty." Mm-hmm. George Washington.
Yeah, his farewell address is a famous address in which he warned of politics splintering into divisiveness and parties and all that.
And, no matter who we elect, I don't think any one person should have as much power as we give our president of the United States. They should not have the power to do all that they're doing. So that's another topic, but that's one of the places we want to drill down in future webinars.
Yeah, and speaking of which, we all put our eggs in the basket of the president who's going to be our great hope. But really, change comes, and this is another important thing to visioneer the future, change comes from the bottom up. What we create, and especially in collaboration, can become true and can change the narrative and change the story as more people adopt that change in whatever change it is. So we're getting a couple of people in the chat box. I'll just read it now from Trudy. Evolution in Action. Katie Porter, the representative from California, interviewing Robert Redford, director of CDC, insisting he answer yes or no until he stopped dodging and agreed to pay for COVID-19 testing for those not able to pay. And oh, and you saw that. So yeah, Katie Porter is definitely a wonderful person. And Marie wrote, in Switzerland, they have a group of 7 people who rotate president every year. Most people there don't even know who the president is half the time. I think we should move to that system. Yeah.
I'm glad, Marie, for bringing that up, because I think that's, that's amazing, and that no one can be given that much power. And so they do it in a different way. Swiss have always been pretty enlightened politically.
Yeah. And Ireland started something, I think, just a couple of years ago, and it led to the passage of 2 monumental bills for a Irish Catholic company, the legalization of abortion and the legalization of gay marriage in Ireland. And what it is a citizen panel. They have a word, and it's I think like 100 people randomly chosen through the citizenry become this legislative body, and it's overseen by the Chief Justice of Ireland's Supreme Court. And they come together, come up with ideas, laws, rules, and then they can become on the ballot. And that's what happened with the referendums on abortion and gay marriage, which was, as I said, monumental. It was really
monumental for a Catholic country. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So another topic on these sectors of transformation, and of course we can't forget the personal transformation, but we may not spend as much time talking about that. But when we personally change, as Gandhi said, we are the change we want to see in the world. We help change the story. But economics is a big one in terms of the sector of transformation. For a lot of people, kind of gives them a glassy-eyed look. Their eyes get glassed over to think about economics, but truly, to live in a true democracy, there has to be an economic democracy. You can't have one without the other. An oligarchy is more of an economic tyranny and not a democracy. There was a lot of talk during the presidential campaign when it was more active of looking at some of the social democracies in Europe and other countries and what they were doing. And perhaps we're not the same as other countries, but the common theme was that everything for the common good, and the rules, the laws, single payer, and different things were all for the common good. So Anodea, you said you had a download, so to speak.
Yeah, I had kind of a way of looking at it yesterday as I was meditating and doing my yoga, of watching what's happening as the whole economic system is getting dismantled right now, and many of the things are changing, where they're talking about banning evictions and banning foreclosures for a period of time as people can't pay because they've lost their jobs because of the lockdown, and people are losing money in the stock market, and everything, all bets are off. We don't know how long this virus is going to keep us closed down. We don't know what that's going to do to the world economy. We don't know the long-term effect of it. All these people not working are not going to be paying very much taxes when they file their returns next year. I mean, this has long repercussions. And, I was thinking about how the problem is not, what capitalists do is just, built into that system. It's not like people are evil or greedy necessarily. I mean, some are. But what if we had a reward system based on generosity? And I don't know if anybody's seen it, but in 2011, there was a movie called In Time with Justin Timberlake, in which the currency of a future civilization, it takes place in 2169, is time, not money. And you have this little thing on your wrist that when you work, it adds hours to your life. And when you buy something, it takes hours away from your life, or weeks if it's a big purchase, or years. And of course, the rich have forever to live, and the poor are living day to day, just trying to get enough hours so they can live into next week. Very symbolic of our culture. Well, it got me thinking that what if with our phones, there was some kind of app where if someone does something benevolent, they, clean up some garbage, they do some community service, they help somebody out, they get, like we do on Facebook, likes, and they get these points. I was calling them Benny points for doing something benevolent. And we go to work and we get Benny points. And if we do something that is of service, we get these points, and those points can then be redeemed for goods. And that we're paid for what we give rather than what we take. Because right now we have an extractive economy, that people earn money by extracting from the warehouse of the earth. And, it's like they're selling all this stuff, but they're not putting anything back in the warehouse. And that's going to lead to a kind of bankruptcy later on that's not going to be solved by a bailout. We can't bail out the forest. It takes too long for the trees to grow. So we need a different kind of economy, one that is based on giving. And I was calling it a generocracy, one that is generative and generous. So that's a little, I don't know if that even makes sense, but.
Well, that's brilliant. So when we talk about visioneering the future, you just visioneered something. And
Yeah.
Anodea, you and I have talked about doing a visioneering laboratory, visioneering academy. These are the kind of exercises that we can start visioneering, because we look back 20 years ago, what was then and what is now in terms of what people have visioneered, like it or not, in terms of technology and so many things. You wouldn't recognize people from 20 years ago if they just time traveled now. They'd be going, holy smokes, how'd that happen? So, and these are how these ideas come when we visioneer. And truly for changing the economics, and that's what a lot of people are now looking at, to rewire the matrix or re-knit the fabric, the social fabric. It's really creating a society in which everyone can thrive, in which everyone can succeed, prosper, thrive in whatever way they are capable of. And there's been a lot of ideas like universal basic income, single payer healthcare in this country, which isn't, canceling student debt because it's insane, the debt load of what students have, and it's a bubble that's going to burst. Free college, Green New Deal, it all kind of falls under the rubric of a life economy. And the reality is that we have the ability, and so the criticism always is, well, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to make it happen? We can't just give everything away. But the reality is, it is possible. There are economic ways to do it. It's in economics, it's called quantitative easing, and it's actually, if you're following the news and watching what's happening in the United States, every country has a central bank. The United States has a central bank, the Federal Reserve, and they have basically just printed money and bailed out banks by buying their debt. That's called quantitative easing. The reality is they are not printing money. The term is printing money, but all they're doing is electronically conjuring up money and putting it into the ledger sheets of the bank, because they want the banks then to have money to be able to freely give it out. And that's part of the debate that's holding up the stimulus bill in Congress, is because Republicans want that money to go to bail out all these corporations and not have any restrictions on them. So they will once again do stock buybacks, because in 2008-9, 95% of the stimulus money went to stock buybacks and purchase of assets to raise the stock market, to raise the stock price of the companies so that the executives could get bigger bonuses, and people were left out in the cold. So that is not what wants to happen. So people have been advocating, it's been advocated for what's called a people's quantitative easing, where the money goes to people. And by doing that, so this has been around this idea of quantitative easing, and it's also under the idea of what's called MMT, modern monetary theory. And so the central bank needs some directive from Congress, but the money can go right to people. And so it's a totally different way of seeing things. But to do that, paradigms have to shift, mindsets have to shift. And as I said at the outset, and showed that little clip from John Perkins talking, mindsets can change quickly. And that's what we're seeing now in volatile times. Great evolutionary leaps are taken. So it's there for us. So
I think we should go to the environment because we're getting short on time, and we want to be able to have people weigh in.
Yeah, we'd love to hear
about some of the things that are going on as a result of this corona crisis.
Yeah. So you've been talking about it. I have some pictures that I can show, but I'll let you.
Okay, I'll start in.
Say.
So I see, I'm a believer in the planet as a living being that is self-organizing. Not a living being the way we think of ourselves, but we know that Gaia self-organizes to keep the oceans at the same level of salinity, that keeps the same 21% oxygen in the atmosphere. These things don't happen by themselves. The microorganisms actually interact with each other. They're senior on this planet, and they self-regulate the temperature, the oxygen, the oceans, all that, to sustain itself for life. And so Gaia is self-regulating. And this virus may be an aspect of her self-regulation. And I'm amazed at what it is doing. It's cleaning the air, and it is getting us to all slow down and stop what we're doing that has been contributing enormously to climate change. And this is such like an intelligent surgical strike. And I'm not out there celebrating that people are dying, and I don't want to be callous to any of that. But as far as cleaning up the environment, it is doing more than we were doing on our own. And even to the point where I could look at myself and say, well, I shouldn't drive here, or I shouldn't fly there, which might be true. But I know that if I don't fly somewhere, I'm not in that seat. Somebody else is going to take my seat. The plane's going to go anywhere anyway. And I'm going to feel like, well, what good is that? But now we're all doing it. Planes have been grounded. Cars are not driving as much. There's not as much rush hour traffic because people are commuting from work. There is an enormous cleansing going on. In the first 2 days of the lockdown here in the San Francisco Bay Area, the particulate matter in the air was down 40% in just 2 days. So this is a major environmental healing that is going on as a result of this virus that in the long run will heal us all. They say in China, 1 million people a year die from air pollution. Well, that's a lot more than died from the virus. So it's actually saving lives. And you have some pictures to show us on that.
Yeah, but yes, I'll here we go. And go to full view. So let's start. This is satellite imaging of pollution a year ago in Los Angeles, March 1st to March 19th, 2019 on the left. You can see the big clog of carbon monoxide, smog. And on the right, a year later, look how much lighter it is. So that's Los Angeles. And here's a picture from this past Friday afternoon in LA, the 110 Harbor Freeway, when a time when it would be jam-packed. One car, one lonely little car. But look at that, amazing.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Here's New York City on the left, a year ago, March 1st to March 19th, big smog. And a year later, March 1st to March 19th, much smaller area, a little dense, but smaller. Seattle, again, 2019, first part of March on the left, and on the right, boy, there's virtually no pollution there at all. And and Anodea, you showed me this, you sent me this today. China, And this is this year, the first part of January on the left, and this is mean tropospheric pollution, this yellow, a lot of big parts, and the brown parts even more. And here on the right, less than a month later, look how less polluted it is. And China is well known for how polluted it is. So amazing. So there we go.
Gone. And I was in Beijing last year, and you couldn't see 100 feet. It was so polluted. I mean, it was terrible. Well, maybe, I don't know what 100 feet is, but you couldn't see 100 yards, I'd say, clearly, because it just looked like you were in a fog all the time. And I've seen pictures of Beijing where the sky is blue and there's white fluffy clouds. It's amazing. You wouldn't have thought it was possible. But this is what the virus has done.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine say to me, oh, climate scientists must feel like it's Christmas, just in terms of how much better the world looks. So look what we can do in a small period of time. Look at China, 3 weeks from those two pictures were about 3 weeks apart.
Yeah, and then their lockdown
and amazing.
On for 2 months. So it's probably even better now.
Yeah.
And 2 days of San Francisco taking it down 40%. Well, what's it going to be like as we do this for a month or so?
Yeah.
The question is, will we go back to polluting as soon as this crisis is over?
Well, that's where this is our opportunity. As we all know, the Chinese word for crisis contains danger and opportunity. And this is our opportunity because, as I said, the social fabric fell apart so quickly. And we realized, one, how interconnected we are and how our economy, our world is so fragile, and we can't let this happen again. And so this is why I said right at the beginning, this is our chance. This is our really amazing chance to create changes. Marie has sent a message in the chat box. She wrote, let's not forget the worst that has happened in Italy, the seat of the Vatican. I feel it is time for religion to get a major attitude adjustment. Also, the whole East-West issue, think Edward said. So many churches have no sense of ecology, especially in the US. Most of our Catholic church carnivals are major garbage producers, both in food they offer, etc. I was furious with our pastor whining about not being able to say mass to the masses, not considering that a day of rest might include not driving to church. In a way, it's like, it's a spiritual sanctuary, the ability to stay home. This is the second week, maybe longer for some people, but I think, people are settling into the routine of being home and realizing, hey, this isn't so bad.
Yeah.
So who needs to go to church? We have our religion. Yeah. Imagine if we had a society where we had universal basic income, where people could decide, hey, you know what? I don't want to take that job. I'm just going to work. I have my universal basic income, which generally isn't, which is enough as a starting, as a help, maybe $1,000 a month or so. So then that allows you to decide how else you want to work, in what way. And it changes the mindset, it changes the paradigm. It's a game changer. And as I said, the ability to do it is there. And it's really the will, political will, and the will of us who are all willing to visioneer. So let's open it up. Anodea, anything more you want to say?
Well, other topics we might talk about in the future, education or healthcare, but I think right now we want to open it up to questions, to comments, to shares. What you can do under the participants button, there's a place to raise your hand. Under Q&A, you can type a question in, and we will get that and can read it, or you can type a question into the chat box. So any way that you want to participate, I don't want it just to be all Michael and I talking, but we are throwing out ideas to generate ideas and just find out how this is landing on you, what you're thinking, what areas you're working in. I appreciate what Marie and others have shared so far. We have a comment from Brian. The virus imposes the notion of the individual becoming their own guru as opposed to the traditional led religion. And that's true. We're in our finding our own direct spirituality. You know, to come home and do yoga and meditate and take walks in nature or whatever it is, not to do it through some teacher or priest, but to find our own connection. It's a spiritual retreat. And I find it interesting that all of this is happening during Lent, which is particularly long this year as Easter is late. And Lent is a time when people make sacrifices and they go inside to deepen their spiritual connection. So I find that this is very interesting. This is kind of imposed on us, but it has a silver lining. So any comments people have if you want to participate?
And you had posed questions also of what are the game changers and what is the game changing into? So if anyone would like to try just posing an answer or even a question on top of that question, what is the game changing into? And that's basically what we've been talking about during this webinar. Where are we going? And this is our opportunity to really create the more beautiful world our hearts tell us is possible and to visioneer. So there's so many possibilities of what can be brought forth for all of us. And Robert and Brian wrote, "Rend not your clothes, rend your hearts." And Robert wrote, "Appreciate hearing that we're all working under this new umbrella." We're really, it's and here's the thing. I talked about viruses a little bit. What's going to happen when all is good, and could be 6 weeks, 8 weeks, nobody knows. But because there are so many viruses and because viruses mutate, I'm not saying this to scare anyone, we're going to go out there. There may be some more cases, and then they may say, go back home. Who knows? But that's a whole nother conversation about how we become healthy, how we strengthen our immune system. But we cannot fear this virus, because this is, we have to live with courage and boldness and be ready to take action and not be afraid. But it's going to remind us that we really cannot be complacent. We have to visioneer the future. Brian has asked to put on the Q&A, given the leadership role that states have assumed, do you think that there will be renewed emphasis on states' rights as the first step for more local decision-making at the local level? That's a really good question, Brian.
And that dovetails into Robert's comment that came in at the same time, working now and supporting decentralizing power from the county to the local communities and empowering my local community, alternative currency, creating makeries, etc. So it's the same kind of question that Brian just asked. You know, is power going to get decentralized and become more localized, whether at the state level, the county level, the town level? And only if it is can people really feel like they are empowered citizens to get involved. And this
and I think that's part of, and I think that's part of the collaborative commons breaking down from that top-down paradigm, moving into a bottom-up, is that we feel more empowered to not only self-master of our own lives, but the lives of our community. We take more initiative and we can create things in our community because, you know, as I said, all politics is local. So we have our most impact locally. We want a federal government that's also coherent with the needs of people, with what people needs. So we need it both ways. We need, like Doctress Utopia writes, I take a different point of view. We need a world governance system. It's world health now. And I agree with that too. It's kind of the yin and yang of it, it comes both ways, because all politics is local. We need to master and make more sustainable our communities, but we also are world citizens at the same time. And if there's a global mind, if a global heart awakens, as you say in the title of your book, Anodea, and we want to create heaven on earth, utopia on earth, we want all peoples to come together. So thank you, Doctress Utopia, for bringing that up. because don't want to fragment into tribes where we become too localized.
Yeah. And, again, I think it's about the organizing principle, because a world governance system that is organized with the top down, like we have a president of the world who then, can be a dictator, or, whether someone's benevolent or not, that puts the whole world at risk. I think we need to get away from governing systems where any one person has the power to make decisions that affect everyone in the world. If Donald Trump or Jair Bolsonaro from Brazil, take actions that turn us backwards from making progress on climate change, that affects not just the people in those countries, it affects everyone all over the world. And in fact, it'll affect people in other parts of the world more than it will in the US initially, people in the warmer climates. And so we should not have a system where a president of one country has the right to do that. Make a decision that negatively impacts so many people in the world. And that's where a kind of world governance needs to be a higher level of governance than the national. And yet what we don't want is the same old organizing top-down principle where we elect a president and vice president of the world, and then they tell everybody else what to do, because we are open to the same issue of, a dictator coming into a power, or, someone that is not fit for the job. And we're getting some real demonstrations of that right now.
Yeah. And the world, we can't be decentralized. I see Marie writing about the issue of decentralization and equality and access to education. But we are so interconnected all over the world, and it's the butterfly effect, the little pebble going into the ocean in Malaysia will have repercussions all around the world, or butterfly flapping its wings. So we always have to have one eye or two eyes on the world, and then one or two eyes on locality too, and it goes both ways. And I think, and I saw Dr. Snutropia wrote about seeing an AI collective intelligence, so superhuman. I think that's a really good point. I think in another webinar talking about when we really get into drill down about visioneering and the quantum mind and its relationship to technology and quantum computing and all that. I talked about somewhat in the webinar I gave in January on awakening your revolutionary potential. That's a whole nother conversation, and we could go on a lot longer. So thank you, Dr. Snutropia, for even bringing it up. So we're starting to cook with some comments and questions.
Judy
so we'll
says, just want to say how important it is to organize for absentee ballots in the November election. If the virus resurges in the fall, which we know it could, we have to urge our elected officials to get this together, Capitol, now, or it will be chaos. Yeah, these things take some time to get into place. And of course, it could be that we can't go to the polls, and there's people, postponing their primaries even now. And how do we make sure the elections are fair? How do we make sure the Russians don't interfere in our elections? How do we make sure that the voting machines are not hackable? There is an enormous amount of work to be done on this front, and it's not being done very much or very well. And it may be that is just dismantling this whole system the way we have it, and something else is going to rise in its place. I don't know.
Yeah. And this is our opportunity. Yeah, we always have to safeguard democracy. And that's the problem of living in an oligarchy. And Brian, in that same Q&A, put in neighbors helping neighbors, help strengthen communities, which increase the sense of ownership by citizens in their communities. And they may decide they don't want to give up their voice to government. Do you agree? And that's what we're talking about, the importance of cohesion in communities, people working together to create thriving life in their community. So I'm not sure when you say they may decide they don't want to give up their voice to government. I think being active in a community, it's possible to be active in the community and government. And then Brian writes to you, Anodea.
Oh yeah, loved your ideas of Minister of Forestry and for other areas of government. Would love to hear more on the logistics of electing these officials. Well, this is an idea I've had for a long time, and I really don't know how to implement it. I throw these ideas out there and hope someone will run with them. But that if we could elect people who are really qualified for the cabinet positions, rather than electing one man or woman who then, fires everybody in the former administration's cabinet and puts their own people in there. We know that didn't go too well this time, and we have some extremely unqualified people in very important cabinet positions. And in fact, part of the coronavirus crisis is that money has been taken out of the CDC and, taken away from science, and now we're paying the price. So what if we people ran for office as, being qualified to lead the country on healthcare, and we elected someone, to lead that. And then we elected someone to, like I say, be the Minister of Forestry, a Minister of Economics. These are things that take a lifetime of study to really be wise about. And our politicians have to spend half their time raising money and campaigning to get reelected. They can't possibly be really well educated on economics, healthcare, environment, all these areas that we're talking about. They have to vote with not that much knowledge. And we vote on people that are, they look good on TV or they have a powerful presence. That doesn't mean they're qualified to make decisions about our economic system or our healthcare system or our educational system. We need people who have studied that. So what if those were the people running for office that we elected, and then they made decisions that were implemented through the senators and the Congress people that took it from Washington or wherever the center was back to their states to be implemented. And that's a kind of wise leadership, that people who are really qualified and have studied those areas all their life, they make the decisions, not the politicians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've said that part of this, creating this new world paradigm part of it is more enlightened thinking. So I think that's what you're saying, Anodea, wiser people, more enlightened. And all the rights, we need a politics that is global, not just local. We have a country, US, whose president can make decisions that affect all of us, even if we have no say in his election. I think that's what we were saying. It reminds me, a friend of mine in Australia in 2016 in the fall, we communicated on Facebook, and he said, "Hey mate, what do you think? Trump gonna win?" And I said, "No way, don't worry about it." And he said, "Well, just concerned. Trump, the American president is the world president, and it would be great if us folks here in Australia and other countries could have a vote in this person." So, yeah. And Nina writes, applying the Ireland participation idea, what if country areas, Northwest, NW, Southwest, different regions, elected representatives to serve 10 years only, selected a problem, tackled solutions, the U.S. Advisory Board. So thank you, Nina. And this is what we're getting at, the Visioneer Academy, the Visioneer Laboratory. We need the ideas to roll and get the juices flowing, because this is our opportunity to change things. And Brian writes, love those comments, so true on qualified office holders in each area of government. So many different areas of transformation to look at. Healthcare, we touched on a few things, and we've talked about Anodea drilling down into some of these areas in future conversations. So, yeah, so we're 6 minutes past the hour, so probably can wrap it up.
Probably time to wrap it up a bit, but I just leave everyone with the question that we are asking today: what are the game changers, and what is the game changing into? And when the game changers come along, we can get ahead of the game, in a sense, by figuring out what it's changing into, figuring out where it's going, and that is looking to the future. Evolution is at work in us and through us, And it is happening in the world right now. We're in a period of disruption that is making possible for evolution, and that's when the time is most fertile for new ideas. So we're doing these webinars to invite you to share your ideas, to think in these terms, to get out of the immediate and look at the bigger picture of where we are going as a collective, because the more we awaken to that, the easier it will be to get there.
Yeah. Well said. I second that. I concur. Yeah. So, yeah, and Olenka, thank you. Much love to you too. Yeah, it's great to have intelligent, enlightened conversations that really are looking at the future with hope and promise, not with fear. We have such a fear-based society, let alone without the virus, a fear-based society.
Yeah, we do.
We don't need that anymore.
No.
Through fear. Yeah. So.
I find fear, I consider that the demon of the first chakra, and fear has made everybody go out and buy toilet paper for their first chakras. So it's very interesting where the fear goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Marie. Fear allows others to be controlled. That's absolutely true. And you put them in fear and then they can be controlled. And that's when we give up our power, when we give in to fear. Yeah, thank you for that, Brian. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, great to see so many of you on this webinar. If you have interest, we will do future ones where we drill down on, one of these topics for a whole hour, and similar format where people can, chime in, right?
Yeah. No, this is great. This is the way to do it. Yeah, we're all in it together.
And
social solidarity.
Yeah.
Social solidarity and soulcraft.
Yeah. And I love, Michael, the way you have these phrases for things, like the collective commons or, the collaborative commons, because we need to be able to name these ideas as a way of bringing them into reality and naming them. Oh yeah, now we know what that is. That's why I was calling a generocracy. What if we have a, system that rewards you for what you give rather than what you take? So we need to, coin the phrases. Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll have more conversations in the future.
Yeah. Have a beautiful rest of the day. Okay. Till next time. Yep.
All right.
Bye. Ciao.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Anodea.